We are proud to be sponsored by Kiteworks, a secure content platform for CMMC compliance. Kiteworks is FedRAMP Moderate authorized and helps accelerate your path to CMMC 2.0 compliance. Did you know Kiteworks puts defense contractors on the fastest path to meeting CMMC 2.0 requirements, leveraging the same zero trust framework guidance used for federal requirements? Kiteworks supports nearly 90% of the security requirements for CMMC 2.0 Level 3. This can drastically reduce the effort and costs associated with obtaining CMMC 2.0 authorization. What's really cool to us is Kiteworks has an ongoing bounty program and regular penetration testing to minimize vulnerabilities along with one-click appliance updates. Kiteworks provides unparalleled ease of use with its intuitive web UI, mobile apps, and even Outlook integration. This user-friendly experience avoids productivity disruptions during your CMMC 2.0 implementation. Accelerate your CMMC 2.0 compliance and address federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal, secure file sharing platform made for defense contractors. Visit kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to get started today. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today, we have the Mark Mosher alongside me. Mark, how are you, sir?
Wonderful, David. I'm really excited about this episode. It's like somebody just handed me the keys to the technology resource library having this guest on. Isn't that right? Right? Yeah. Tell the listeners who's on the episode with us today, David.
Yeah, I'm excited. But I do want to say you were never in a library when you were in school.
No, so I've just heard about them growing up.
I don't know. I think I told you about it. Maybe.
That's where I got it from.
That's great. So we are joined by Steve Orrin, who's the CTO, federal CTO for Intel Federal, which is the maker of almost every computer on the planet, basically. Steve was named one of InfoWorld's top 25 CTOs, received the Executive Mosaic's top CTO Executives Award, is a Washington Exec Top Chief Technology Officer to Watch, a guest researcher at NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, and he is a fellow at the Center for Advanced Defense Studies and the chair of the INSA Cyber Committee. Steve, welcome to the studio, sir.
And an all-around nice guy, too.
Very nice.
Thank you.
And I'm sure there's a lot of things that I missed.
You got to put that in his intro. That's part of his bio from now on, every time he comes on. And he's a really nice guy.
He really is.
Well, thank you, David and Mark. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, we're excited about having you. So what is new recently? Last time that we met, it was close to a year ago. You gave us your background, how you got into it. We talked about threat canaries, which was really interesting.
Very cool.
Learned all about that, all these different types of ways that cybersecurity practitioners can leverage technology to kind of detect things and trap threat actors. Since then, a little thing called generative AI, which has been around for a while, but it really made a splash and has hit mainstream, all over the world. And it's dividing a lot of people. There's a lot of opinions on it. What are you seeing being debated right now, and what insight can you share with us?
Sure. And so there's a lot to go into there. I think every industry and every market is caught the bug of AI and sees it as the new shiny object. And everyone's trying to figure out how best to leverage it, how to deploy it, how to get the most of it, how to jump onto the hype cycle, if you will. The federal government's no different. The AI in general and the more recent generative AI and large language models can be transformative for mission and enterprise applications and operations. It's a major advantage if we can figure out how best to leverage it. And so the government is spending a lot of time and energy focused on both practical applications of AI, research into developing AIs that work for their mission needs. And as in a lot of the conversation and debate, how do we ethically use AI? And really in the government space, one of the other key tenets is trustworthy AI. How can I trust the AI? Because it's not like I'm making a recommendation about what presents to buy my kids for their birthday. It's making life or death decisions. It's giving information to operators, to the mission. It's being used in national security environments, being used for citizen services. And so one of the fundamental questions that a lot of people are asking are what are the ways that we can build trust into or at least have a way of assessing the trust. And that's a lot of times mixed together with the ethical use. And there is a connection there because if you're able to ethically to define how you're ethically using it, you're providing transparency into the way that you develop the AI, which is a foundation for how you then figure out how to trust it. But trustworthiness goes a step further because it's not just, well, did I build it securely or with trust in mind and with ethical controls? But how have I deployed it? How am I maintaining it? Am I constantly verifying that it isn't going astray? And so trustworthy is a bigger nut to crack, if you will. And it's definitely part of the conversations as many of these really cool AI projects start to try to figure out how do they transition to practice and get deployed. The question that ultimately gets asked by the programs, by the mission operators, and by the non-AI developers is, okay, well, great. It just told me something. Can I trust it? Right. You know, when it presents me information, tells me there's something coming my way. Can I trust that? Do I act on that information? And so that opens the door to a variety of conversations around, how do I secure the AI, the development life cycle? How do I know that the data that I got was secure and that was trustworthy? So it opens up a Pandora's box, if you will, of additional insights and questions that need to be answered as part of the process.
Yeah, it really does. So from a mid-market business executive, business owner, or a leader in a larger organization who heads up a division, let's say, from their perspective, and they want to leverage AI and they want to implement it for their employees, the risk of AI hallucinating or the risk of AI, the data being poisoned is, that's one concern, right? But then there's also the responsible and ethical use of it. So is there two, meaning on the one side, it could be injected with bad data, right? Which could lead to inaccurate results, but also how do you use it? Meaning, let's say you're not going to use it in a format that is poisoning the data or giving it like intending to give it purposeful, incorrect data. But you just want to know how to use it so that you're not disclosing trade secrets. You're not using it, to harm your organization's brand. So when you were talking about the guardrails and the ethical use, can you explain to us what those were?
Sure. And a couple ways to look at it, because you're asking those two questions actually get to fundamental different parts of the life cycle. Mm-hmm. Got it. But they're connected because ultimately it's how you're using the AI. But at its core, you have to remember AI is built from data. It is the ultimate data consumer. Your AI, it's like the old logic question, garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
And so knowing what data went into the AI in the development and the model creation, the training is absolutely critical for both of those answers. On the ethical use, part of it is knowing what your end use case is. You have the right data to drive those inferences, to drive those decisions, drive those outcomes. Oftentimes, it doesn't even have to be a poisoning, malicious act. Just having too limited of a data set will give you bad results when you start applying it to a broader group. There's been some unfortunate but very well-documented examples in the healthcare space where the data they got from standard scientists and academia libraries of data sets that have been generated or produced over years, and then they applied it to clinical use cases. And the problem was, and the examples that are often used is much of the original data sets were done by college students coming in, getting their body scanned or submitting to various tests. And when you look at the data, what you find is the demographic, it was 18 to 30-year-old white males.
Right. And
so your data set is very limited. But yet when we use it in a clinical world, right, there's females, there's minorities, there's African Americans, there's Europeans, a very diverse set that you're actually trying to apply that AI to. And so your fundamental flaw is that your data set was not representative. It wasn't diverse enough to actually be able to deal with the diversity of where you're trying to use it. And just saying, well, I'll use some synthetic data, try to generate some other populations really doesn't cut it.
No.
And so it's fundamental to both the ethical and, like you said, how do you prevent bad outcomes? Is knowing your data, knowing that you have a diverse enough data set. And, oh, by the way, it doesn't mean that you have to throw everything out the window, but it also can help guide from the ethical use of where you apply the resulting AI. If you've only trained on one demographic, it may be really good for that demographic, but it will not translate well to others. And so what we're finding with a lot of the ethical and governance, and that's one of the terms we use in data science and AI, is the governance controls need to be established way early in the cycle so that you can enforce or at least provide guidance on diversity of data across multiple populations, data types, so they get a richness in the data, because that will helpful get to better outcomes. And one of the things that ethical use and governance provides is that attestation. So now when I get to the other end, I say, okay, I want to trust this AI. I have, the provenance. I have the evidence to say, okay, here are the data sets that were used to train. Here's the optimization tools I use to tune it, so that when I make my decision, do I want to trust this, or can I apply this to this different population or this different use case? I have at least transparency to know, am I going to be successful, or do I need to do some augmented training, which is where a lot of the excitement now is taking these large language models been trained on a vast variety of data across multiple domains, and then adapt them to very specific domain data sets to be able to help them hone in on the thing you actually care about. A great example is you may have an AI that was trained on every kind of vehicle, ship, airplane known to man across the past 100 years. But your use case may be trying to track airplanes coming into the airport and be able to report on the flying times and delays and things like that. So doing a spot training or an adaptation training on the specific domain, modern aircraft that fly in and out of the United States, will help give you better results for that specific domain. And we see this approach of how do we take existing AIs or existing work and get them to be better suited for the mission area that you're applying to. These are just one of the kind of controls that folks are looking at of ways to wrangle in, if you will, the AI. The other thing to keep in mind, to your other point, though, is that ultimately, once you deploy AI, your job isn't done. And this goes to your point about hallucination and other problems that could happen. Some of it requires making sure you're securing the environment to protect against things like probing attacks and poisoning and some of those coercive attacks that especially when you open up to the broad internet, the prompt injection, being able to try to skew the data, because many of these generative AIs learn from every query.
Right.
And so
no matter who's inputting it, meaning even somebody with bad intent could be putting data in there, knowing what it's going to do to it.
Exactly. And so part of it is securing the front end or the inferencing systems themselves to protect them and protect your model weights. The other is monitoring. And so one best practice we've seen is having continuous query monitoring. So basically checking the AI, is it giving me accurate results? And there's going to be a range, and you have that acceptable range of what we call good answers. But if you're constantly monitoring, you can then plot across time, are you seeing a skew in the confidence levels or a skew in the results, to be able to check, hey, is it starting to hallucinate?
The validity on the level of the output that's coming in.
Yeah.
So are organizations able to decide which AI, which machine data set they can work with, or are they all reliant, or a majority of them, unless you're Oracle or Intel or whatever, like are the majority of businesses, leveraging open AIs?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Ever see a data breach in the news and think, what does this mean for me? Or what should my organization do because of that breach? Well, cybercrime junkies, we've got exciting news. We all know stories help spread security awareness. So July 1st, we launched season 5 of our podcast with a fresh, exciting twist. Cyber Flashpoints. These will be your go-to source for short segments. You'll see all the ways that storytelling helps you understand cybersecurity and how a podcast can even help keep businesses safe online. Come join us for season 5 and our new cyber flashpoint. Hey, before you go, did you know that over 80% of our YouTube viewers don't subscribe to our channel? What is the deal with that? It's free. We don't sell your data, contact you, or spam you. So do us a very important favor. This really matters to us because it's all about that algorithm. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Cybercrime Junkies Podcast, right there on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and let's make Season 5 the best ever.
So I would say the vast majority of both commercial and in many cases federal are leveraging the open source or commercial AI because they've done the heavy lift. I mean, OpenAI has trained for years on billions of and trillions of parameters. And so they've done the initial investment to get you to that large language model.
Well, once it's poisoned, is it poisoned for everyone or is it just poisoned?
Question.
So it's a good question. It depends on the poisoning. We find, and there's been some great papers on this, that poisoning can happen at any phase. And so some of the large language models, the OpenAIs, the Bards, the Llamas, there have been targeted poisoning attacks, but they have teams that are actively monitoring and looking at ways where they can either undo the poisoning. So there are techniques of how you...
I would think they could use the same optimization flow to eradicate the poison. Right, like if they
eradicate is a strong word there, David.
Okay.
He's like, I wouldn't go that far.
Reduce it, water it down a little.
That's better. Right. Yes, because one of the things that there was a Google paper that was put out a couple of years ago that said once a large language model was poisoned, you can never completely eradicate that because it's built into the new model, the new weighting, but you can reduce its impact. And one of the things that the controllers of those AIs can do, if they see that an AI is going too far off track, they have the private, they can actually take it back in time and start it again from a point in time and again, it's questioning of when is the good time to do that. But they can, in a worst case scenario, they can always roll back.
Before Mark started using it, probably.
Exactly.
Before I poisoned it.
Now, the flip side... The flip side is for a lot of your, whether it be a small business or even a large business or federal government is, for the vast majority of the valuable or interesting use cases aren't just going to ChatGPT and typing in, give me an essay based on Shakespeare for an 8th grade paper. It's to solve a particular problem within your domain. Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing is this shift from sort of the massive open AI systems, not the company, but the general idea to domain specific AI. And what they're doing is they're taking the work that was done by those large language models and then doing a very focused training on either their data set or a data set that's relevant for that domain. And healthcare is a great example, finance, where there are data sets, of health records across every hospital system where I can take the large language model and train it on that. The big challenge goes back to your ethical use. Mm-hmm. I can't just take all these electronic medical records and shift them up to, Facebook or Microsoft or OpenAI and say, hey, train on this too, because it's proprietary or it's personal identifying information, it's healthcare data.
Right, it's PH.
But what they can do is build their own instance of a smaller large language model. They don't need the trillions of parameters.
Yeah, like slice the data and kind of put garbage.
Or slice the model to take the model, bring it local and apply it to the data set in a controlled environment to train it on the data that they care about with the proper control so you don't get the exfiltration of the private information back to the mothership. And so we're seeing that approach. And there's techniques like RAG, which is very exciting now as well, of how do I get these large language models focused in on my particular domain. And because I'm not trying to train for every possible query, a doctor's not going to ask for the Shakespeare paper for an 8th grader. Right. I only have to focus on the kind of questions that a doctor would ask around, is this spot cancer? That's a much smaller set that I have to deal with, which means I can build better controls in on what is allowable prompts. I can reduce my poisoning, and I can also more easily verify are my results still in line with what I'm doing. And so we're seeing this massive shift across the industry from just, everything's going to happen in the big language models to more domain specific today. And where we project things going in the industry is going to organizational specific. So you think about a healthcare organization will train on all electronic medical records they have access to and insurance data today as the current process. In the future, it will be Columbia Presbyterian training on their medical records for their patients with their procedures, and their IP and their doctor's information will be contained on their cloud instance or on their on-prem instance to get the maximum value out of the AI. Of course, it takes more work because you have to collect and manage that data set. But what we're seeing this trend towards moving that direction. And what you're finding the big AI is doing is helping to provide those tools to help organizations transition to get the most out of the AI systems they're playing with.
Let me ask you about government regulations. The congressional hearings that we've seen, right, have demonstrated to a lot of observers that several people in Congress might not be like advanced technology leaders, right? Are they getting and coordinating with of advanced technology resources that understand this to
they struggled with TikTok
regulations that make sense?
So the best way to answer that is with a two-pronged answer. One is the staffers for many of those congressional folks are really smart. Technically, they've got their domain. I
agree. I know many of them, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that interface with a lot of the tech companies.
Yeah, they're the ones who are in our ear going, they don't know what they're doing. We have to guide them. Right? Because they're very bright at what they do, but this is something brand new. And it's not something that maybe, an elder statesman or woman has grown up with, right? So.
Exactly. And then the other area is where is in the government industry collaboration.
Right.
So there's been both congressional mandated as well as DoD-led, IC-led, even civilian agencies are working with the industry associations, with collaborations with think tanks, labs. A lot of the research labs are working with academia and with industry to collaborate on helping to guide the adoption and use of AI for both the federal government as well as how best to provide guidance. And so you'll see in like the executive orders and things buried down underneath there, besides, we have to have AI officers and proper ethical controls, is, NIST and NSF and other organizations are tasked with reaching out to and engaging academia, the industry, and other governments to collaborate on building better guidance, building controls, demonstrating the best practices. And so we're seeing that filter down. NIST has taken up the charter. There's the National AI Research, I forget what the extra R stands for, NAIRR, but it's basically an NSF and government-funded engagement with academia and industry to collaborate together on both advancing AI, but also on building in some of those guidance around ethical and proper use of the AI and of the data sets that drive them.
Do you think there will be an overall federal regulation for all Americans ever, or is it really going to be broken down to individual verticals or individual industries?
So, Dave, it's a really good question. I'm not a policy person per se. I can tell you that in general, the typical way that the U.S. government goes and industries in the U.S. government is that the government provides guidance and requirements. And you'll find that, vertical industry specific regulations. So the finance industry will come up with its guidelines. Right. Healthcare will come up with its guidelines. The federal government will have guidance for their individual agencies. So the DoD was tasked with coming up with ethical and operational use guidelines for AI. And so they did that. They developed, and one of the cool things, they published it. So you can go to the DoD and look up their AI use policy, their AI guidance, because it's a great representation that any large organization should look at and say, I think we can do about 60% of this because they already figured out some of the gotchas there.
Right, exactly.
We are seeing in some other governments, the UK, for example, where they have a little bit different structure in the relationship between the government and the private sector, where in certain cases they are dictating, this is what you will do. I don't think that, honestly, government in the US is more advisory. And then for their own consumption, will stand up controls as a representation of what different industries will do. But I think you'll see different verticals come up with their own, and they may be a lot of commonality. Eventually, you're going to want commonality because the big tech companies don't want to build 50 different flavors for 50 different industries. Yeah. But I think you'll see it driven more by the vertical itself, finance, healthcare, critical infrastructure, energy, things along those lines that will drive their adoption and requirements for how they're going to ethically use AI. I think where you're seeing a lot of the focus on the government is to get the ball rolling on what are those guidelines, what are some ethical use primitives. And NIST, and like I said, will come up with guidance documents to help industry sort of have a baseline to begin with.
Excellent, excellent. So, what do you say to organizations that have not created policies yet on what their employees should be doing for AI? I mean, shouldn't they have some, like, there's some that I know of that are just like, they're essentially saying to their employees, until people figure this out, do not use it on company devices.
Right. Yep.
And to me, I think that puts them at a competitive disadvantage. Is there a middle ground? Is there a responsible work that we could just tell everybody, don't put personal information or any brand names in there or any code for our products type thing? Any guidance there? Any thoughts on that?
So there's a couple ways to answer that. I'll start with your first comment that any company that doesn't yet have a policy better get one quick, because the odds are, just like we had with cloud and wireless and every other technology advancement, they've got shadow IT, they've got shadow AI happening. Yeah. So if they don't, in lieu of a policy, it's going to happen regardless at those organizations, because at the end of the business units have to be competitive, have to get business done, and they're going to use whatever tools in their arsenal. So without guidance and without policy, they're going to go use it. So it's already happening. Right. So they need to get a policy in place. The thing that we found, and I saw this when ChatGPT first came out, about a month or two after the major push, there was a couple examples of where corporate IP from various companies ended up in the ChatGPT engine. Yep. And it was exposed, and there was some media about it. And there was a knee-jerk reaction. We're shutting off ChatGPT across all these big companies and all these schools. And everyone just said, oh, no. And it's like putting your head in the sand. And it actually doesn't solve the problem. Right. And so what we saw very quickly thereafter is a lot of large organizations drafted and put out a policy about how to properly use it. So it wasn't that it was blocked by default now. It was things like, don't put personal information, don't put corporate data, don't put anything that you would have to sign an NDA for. So they created clear guidelines on how best to interact with this tool, similar to how you would interact with social media. You don't put your corporate IP into your Facebook account, nor do you publish your social security number. So it's similar sort of basic guidance of how to leverage a tool, but not how to give away the kingdom. And they enforce that policy both with Word documents that tell you here's the policy and training, as well as with monitors that are looking at some of the connections and doing spot checks the same way we do things like DLP or data loss prevention, being able to look for, our social security numbers exiting, our keywords, like product code names or source code being transferred over these connections. And those are the kind of things that you can do your monitoring from an IT perspective. Right. But ultimately, having the guidance and training your employees, it goes along, because most employees are going to do the right thing if they know what the right thing is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, you really can't, in this modern day, you can't not be using AI somewhere. It's absolutely transforming every vertical and every industry that's out there. What you'll find is that there's a full gamut of where you are on the maturity roadmap, as far as cool little lab experiments inside to full-scale adoption on the other. Everyone is somewhere on that spectrum. And what you'll find, even inside an organization, they'll have one team that's way ahead and one team that's way behind. So we're all learning. And of course, at the same time, the AI industry itself is changing rapidly. So as soon as we get comfortable with one thing, there's a new thing coming. No, we got to go try that thing too. So it's a constant thrash that everyone's trying to keep up with. And the technology is advancing, both from the hardware from our side, as well as from the software that's available to help people get better at developing these solutions.
It's gotten so much better just in the last 6 months. It's unbelievable. Like, I've always used it for ideating and for content creation and coming up with ideas, because you can go and Google it and then all the blue links that come across, go and look at each one, or you could ask AI that's already done that and it's going to summarize it all for you. Right. And it's really helped speed up things. So I think if it's just done in a good way, it's really powerful, because it just speeds up so many manual tasks. I mean, to me, it's always, tell me what you think of this, because I wanted to ask you this. To me, it's like people are always, I hear it all the time. People are worried that AI is going to take their job. It's a knee-jerk, fear-based reaction, right? But to me, it's like, okay, well, it's a generational technology. It's like the automobile, right? When the automobile came out, I believe we lost some horse-drawn carriage mechanics, people that were really good at that.
Right.
But it spurned an entire industry of automobile engineers, right? And designers and factory workers and everything else. And so the positive impact compared to that small group, I don't see, I still think it was generational. Do you feel something like that it's very simple? I mean, it's very similar, or no?
There's definitely similarities, like someone who was doing sort of data entry or certain menial tasks are going to, maybe need to become AI developers so that they can, operate in the new world. But what I find a lot of the practical implementations of AI, it's really about augmenting my job, not replacing my job.
Exactly.
There are many examples and, in all domains of where leveraging the AI is going to do a couple things for you. Number one, it's going to make you more efficient at the work you're doing. Mm-hmm. It's also going to eliminate a lot of the manual, menial work and let you focus on the cool stuff or the interesting problems.
Right.
It's going to generate
more strategic.
Yep. Exactly. And more, it's going to reduce a lot of the manual tasks. So you'll be freed up. And the key thing is that like we said, there's a technology revolution. There's also going to be organizational and cultural revolutions that come along with it. It's not just the people that are impacted. The managers of teams need to understand how best to leverage the AI so that they can give their workforce the right tools, but also then measure them on what they're actually good at. One example I've talked about many times is about the application of AI to cybersecurity professionals and how it's never going to replace my advanced malware hunter or even my firewall administrator.
Right.
But if I could take 80% of their job, which is, fighting fires on a daily basis, doing patches, rolling out firewall updates, checking on the latest status of vulnerabilities, and automate that with an AI and a machine learning engine, then I'll allow them to focus on the 20% that no AI will detect because it's the one-time, new APT, or it's the ransomware campaign that we haven't seen before. So we can actually focus that underpaid, overworked, and very tired cyber team on the 20% hard problems and let the AI deal with the daily firefighting, which is not a good use of their time anyway. And you actually will find in the organizations that have done that, their people are in better moods because they actually feel like they're contributing and they're working on hard problems, and they're not constantly fighting the vulnerability of the day. And so I think it's going to be one of the key ROIs of using AI in cybersecurity. A lot of folks are talking about, well, I'm going to use my AI to detect that one-time really cool malware that no one has ever seen before. Maybe, but I think that's not actually the best use of AI. So you find that one, what about the next 40 that come down the line? However, if I use the AI to deal with the 80% of what I call the stupid stuff, the stuff that just happens every day, the 1,000 hits against the firewall that you just can deal with in a more automated fashion, you actually get better return and a better team because they feel like they're doing something that really leverages their expertise and letting the machine learning deal with the more mundane or the more daily routine. And the other cool thing is those daily routines, we've done that so many times. We have a rich data set of what happens there to train the AI on in the first place.
Oh, good point.
You don't have good data sets on that esoteric one-off nation state APT. That's where you need the human. And so it's actually a really good application of AI. And you see the same thing in contract management or document management or any of the other more mundane manual processes. If I can use the AI to help automate or reduce the time on that, the compliance person can then verify, okay, here are the deviations as opposed to looking through for the 4,000 things that were correct. And so you're really optimizing your team to be more efficient and to then scale by using AI in the right ways. That's going to take some cultural changes on the management side and on the leadership side of knowing where the best place to apply that AI to. And oftentimes we get caught up in the shiny object. Well, AI can solve all my business problems. No, they're not going to make your company a better company because they're going to sell more widgets where your sales team are going to get replaced, but they're going to make your sales team much more efficient. And that's the way to think about where AI is going to ultimately get us to is really that augmentation. It's going to help the worker not replace the worker in most cases.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the sales environment, we've already identified ways that it helps. When you have all these meetings throughout the week, you have to manually review your notes to determine next steps, send off the emails, do all of that. AI can do all that. AI can transcribe the meetings. You can have AI review that, spit out exactly what the next steps were that were discussed in the meeting, what specifically what the client said, so that way you're not relying on your own memory of what they said. It's actually what they said, and then you can fire off and take concrete next steps. And it's 40 meetings with all of this different note taking and things like that can be done in an hour. It's really quite remarkable.
It is. And think about where that goes next. So now, first it gives you the information, but imagine the next phase of that, where it schedules the next meeting. It knows who to invite. It knows the tools you need so it can already deploy it to your system. I mean, we're getting to the point of that intelligence as it learns our workflows, where it can help us be more efficient at the job that we're trying to do. At the same time, it also offers the opportunity for where security is going to be very critical, because we're starting to rely on these AI technologies to make decisions, to inform the way we think about things. And so in that example, when it gives you the meeting notes, you're going to make decisions based on that. But you have to know a human didn't generate those notes. And so how do you trust that you got the right action items?
Good point.
That's where the trust comes in, and having built-in controls and monitoring to be able to trust that the AI is leading you down the right path, or is it sending you off down a rabbit hole that actually isn't going to be beneficial to your sales team?
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's where the putting those guardrails in really becomes so important.
Well, with that being some of the positive outcomes and uses of AI, although I'll admit I thought cybercrime was a passing fad about 10 years ago, and apparently I was completely incorrect on that one. It was a bad call, Moser. Bad call. But what about the early adoption in the use of AI by these cyber criminal gangs or nefarious uses for AI? What are you seeing out there? I mean, it's already been going on, but it seems to be they're leveraging these tools and those data sets more than maybe what some of these verticals in the consumer industry is.
So, Mark, you're right on there. The adversaries, the cyber criminals have absolutely adopted the technology, because any edge they can get in generating revenue for them. And that's the thing to remember. They are revenue generating organizations, or they're trying to accomplish their nation state goals. And they're not held to the same requirement of reliability and trust and ethical use that, legitimate corporations are. So they're much quicker to adopt new technologies, to try them out. And the returns don't have to be, well, we need to have 85% confidence on any AI before we deploy it. Yeah. If it works 10% of the time, that's 10% of the time more than they had before. That's a win. And we're seeing them use all sorts of different AI tools across the vast array of their attack vectors. Everything from really advanced phishing campaigns. If you remember 10, 15 years ago, you'd get a broken English email that you could definitely tell was written by a foreigner. Right. And you knew that wasn't your bank. Now, with AI tools, they can not only craft a really well generated message to you, but if they're targeting you, Mark, they could do some reconnaissance on your social presence, on your emails, and on the things to be able to tailor that phishing campaign so that you will, because ultimately what they want you to do is click the link, so that you will say, oh, yes, that's my bank. I'm going to click the link. We're seeing, I think it's one of the scariest and yet most elegant examples of the combination of AI tools being used for cyber criminal was a story from a few months ago of a company's a financial person was phished through a deep fake video and a live chatbot to transfer $25 million out of the company. And so the video was of the CFO. Yeah. And the CFO with an interactive chat and a video got this person to, basically send the money. And so you think about it, they combined chatbot, deepfake video with a phishing campaign targeting a particular organization.
Wow.
So they did, and they were successful to the tune of $25 million. Shows you the level of sophistication that's already being achieved by the cyber criminals. And the reality is no antivirus product today would have detected that.
No.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, where are we at in terms of deep fake detection? I know that I believe Microsoft and a couple companies have detection that can watermark a video or look at it after it's already recorded, and they can play it and they can say they're either looking at the metadata or they're evaluating it somehow and say this was altered, right? But what about live video? Like, is there anything out there that can do that?
So we've seen there's a couple ways to deal with this. I'll start with a really simple thing that if this happened today, a deep fake tried to call you Mark and get you to transfer all the money out of your company because it was telling you I'm the CFO. There's a little trick that a couple of people have talked about online that would help you at least verify, and that's inline videos. Yeah. Have the person wave, because the odds are they've got really good video of your face that they're doing the deep fake on. But responding to, hey, I want to see you wave hello, or give me the thumbs up, is something they wouldn't have trained on, and so it'd be a quick way to see if the AI could respond to that. Again, that's a short-term fix for a bigger problem. Yeah. Where the research is going, and we're seeing technologies. One is in understanding the techniques that the deepfake generators are using, and so the Microsofts, Facebooks, and many others are looking at ways to detect if a video looks like it was crafted by AI. But honestly, that's going to hit the sort of the commercial or the open source tools that everyone can get access to. Right. The nation state adversary or well-funded cyber gang is going to defeat those. And so where the other area of research, and there's a tool out there called Fake Catcher is one example of some research that Intel and some universities have put out, looking at biomarkers. So right now I'm looking at both of you, you're looking at me. But over the course of our video, my eyes have gone this way, my eyes have gone that way. And so when the deepfake creates my face and creates my image, it's taking an amalgamation of all that video. There's detectors. The two main ones is, number one, eye movement. If my eyes go like this, or one's going this way and one's staying straight, that's an easy to detect. But also the blood flow in my veins. The actual cameras we're using actually have much better capacity than even we use in our computer conversations. And so embedded in these videos, you can actually change the definition to be able to detect the blood flow in my veins. And it's really, with the right bio algorithms, you can detect when it's not the regular thump, 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 thump. Yeah. A deepfake isn't going to give you the thump, 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 thump. So it's the picture that it was using at that time interlaced with others. And so you can detect the erratic rhythm, if you will, of blood flow that isn't going to be able to tell you that's not real. So those are some of the techniques, and there's many more being looked at ways to detect if something is generated from a facial or human perspective. Gets much harder when we look at sort of surveillance video, where it's a grainy image to begin with. Ooh, yeah. And those are some of the things where we're going to need better tools. And we're already starting to see some monitoring of the tools. Another thing that companies like Facebook and Microsoft have access to is the vast majority of the real videos. You think YouTube and Facebook, they actually have all the videos that have been posted out there. So when someone trains on their deepfake generator on those videos and they put together an image, at the end of the day, a Microsoft or a Google or these others can look at, I'm looking at Mark's picture right now. You're sitting there in that room. There's an original video of you doing that. And I can detect what was going on. And so they can do a compare and say, is this video the same as the one that we have posted on the site 12 years ago? Oh. And are there changes? And so there's techniques that you could do. It's not going to catch the real time when but it's a way to sort of go to the repository and say, is this deepfake video being published? And we've seen this being done on Twitter posts and things like that, where someone grabs a video from, Bosnia from 12 years ago and say, oh, this is happening now in, Sri Lanka. And they're actually able to say, nope, we saw this, everything but the humans in the picture. We saw, this picture existed before. We have video evidence of it, and they can do those correlations. So we're seeing a lot of innovation. It's still going to be a while before we get it practically implemented into our viewers and into our cameras so that we can do this kind of real-time detects. But this is a growing area. And in the US, with the upcoming elections and other things that are going on,
misinformation is
a big deal. And so we're seeing a lot of investment in how do I detect, is the information I'm seeing real? Because the reality is very few people physically see anything today. We all are seeing videos of something that was seen. And so there's a real question about how do I trust the information? And deepfakes are going to be a problem ongoing until we as an industry come together and better understand how to detect them.
Yeah, I mean, and you have these groups on Telegram, the Yahoo boys and these groups from Nigeria, where they are posting, they're live capturing how they're using deepfake generators to socially engineer the elderly and these romance scams and these sextortion scams and things like that. And they're openly posting this stuff. They're like, here, you can buy this package and you can go and commit this crime for X amount. You can make this amount. And it's really disturbing. I mean, it's a major cybercrime concern.
Yeah. And David, to that point, you have to remember, it's $1 trillion industry.
Yeah.
And the only way you get there is by having the same kind of efficiencies you'd find in a legitimate $1 trillion industry: customer support, how-to videos, licensing. I mean, there's actually, they showed this with some of the ransomware and APT products that you could buy on the dark web. There's a number to call. And what was fascinating is when you get hit by a ransomware attack and they pop on screen, you pay us 12,000 Bitcoin to get your key. There's a little number there. You can call somebody to help you get Bitcoin so that you can pay because they know the only way they're going to get paid.
They're really good. It's like the best customer service.
It is. They've got an incentive to get you to purchase the Bitcoin.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah, that's so true. We're very familiar with the ransomware as a service model. There's so many changes this year with the takedown of Lockbit and the Black Cat fiasco. So it's quite interesting. So what is coming up next? What are we to expect, and what can people do from organizational perspectives? Have an AI policy. If you don't have one, you need one quickly, right? Continuous user education. What else? What else can organizations make sure is on their agenda?
So I would say there are three things that would be guidance for the business units and the CIOs that are in these organizations, small and large alike, besides like the bare bones of policy and governance.
Yes.
One is get the right tools in the hands of your developer communities. Help them be successful. Give them access to the right tools. Give them the trainings they need. All of you. One of the things we're seeing is that everyone has a role to play in the AI. The most successful implementations, the most successful organizations recognize it's a team sport. So while you have your data scientists and your AI model tuners, and they're really smart in their domain, they're only as good as the understanding what they're trying to do. And so marrying them, having business people and the legal folks work with them to provide the requirements, to provide what data sets are appropriate, give them the information. And what we see is this teaming early in the development lifecycle to get the right controls, the right business outputs, and the workflows identified gives you much better outcomes on the other end. Plus, those teams now have a vested interest. They've been involved with the development, so they're much more likely to adopt it once it comes out the other end. And so getting your teams, culturally, everyone working together with the AI teams has been much more successful than the organizations that create a new division that's our AI group, and they're special, they're off here, we're not going to let anyone talk to them, is a huge mistake.
It is a huge mistake.
So getting those teams working together. The next one is helping the transition. There's a lot of really cool things happening in little labs and little demonstrators at every company. And they get out there, they show their project, and then what? Helping from an organizational perspective to figure out how do I take it from the lab to the real world. Some of that is having the right funding in place to scale it once it's completed. The other is on the team that's building it. Make sure you go after a project that actually is meaningful. So having a cool AI that really gives you better odds in your football pool is not going to be the win. At the same time, you don't want to put the AI project on the most mission critical thing of your organization, because when you fail, and you will a couple times along the way, you don't want to cater the business. So I like to call it find the Goldilocks. Find the one that's meaningful to the business, but is not going to crater the business if you screw it up. And use that as your demonstrator, because once you're done, someone's going to find value in deploying that because it's meaningful to the organization. And then it helps you figure out how to scale it to the more mission critical or enterprise-wide applications once you've shown the benefit on something that does have impact. And so that's the second thing. And then the last thing is knowing that it's not a one and done. It's not like, I built my AI, I throw it out there and I'm done. Right. It's a continuous process. And that's both from enhancing and making the AI better, but it's also about the security and governance controls. And that's what I talked about at the beginning around monitoring, both real-time monitoring of the of the output and the results and the weighting, as well as checking to see, is it hallucinating? Or have we taken it too far? One example we've seen is they'll take a big language model, apply it to a very specific domain, and they constrain it in that domain. And one of the things we find is this great term I was taught a number of months ago called catastrophic forgetting. It's actually a really cool term. And it's basically when you optimize and you miniaturize an AI too much, it will forget the things it learned. And I actually want to get a T-shirt that says, "My AI and I catastrophically forget," because it's a great term. But it often happens, we see, when you're taking a large language model is trained on such a large data set, and you try to miniaturize it too much to meet a specific domain, that if you don't account for that miniaturization, apply and be able to enhance the richness of the data to augment the fact that you're reducing some of those connections, it will end up forgetting the key things it learned in the first place.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
It makes sense though, right?
Yeah. But they came up with a cool term for it.
Yeah, I know. I like the idea of the T-shirt too, Steve. I like that. I'll get you one for Christmas, buddy.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We need those shirts. That's fantastic. Steve, thank you so much. Steve Orrin, Intel Federal. Remarkable insight. Like what you're seeing and your efforts are just bar none. Like it is just phenomenal. What's on the horizon for you? What are you doing in the near future? Any presentations? Any speaking engagements? Where can people find you?
So the best place to find me and what I'm doing is on LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, it's Sorin, Sorrin. That's where I put out where I'm going, what I've done. There's some really cool talks coming up this summer in the AI space, in the security space. I think keep on my LinkedIn to see what's coming next. I will say that for those of us in the security industry, we're all looking forward to the HackerCon, which is DEF CON, Black Hat, B-Sides, and all the related activities in August. In the AI space, the CTO IQ is coming up this fall, which is the major chief data officer event. And then also there's some really good content going to be coming out this fall from Spark AI, which is a new consortium of industry, government, and academia coming together to try to do things like, how do we provide some common ground on governance and proper use, as well as other organizations and think tanks that are really starting to think about what are the right guidance for ethical use that can be practically implemented. So I think we're going to see over the next 6 months, moving away from the you should do good to actual practical guidance of how to do good and where to spend your time and energy to actually help organizations get there. So we've had the last year of sort of, we need something to do it. We need to have a mandate. Now we're seeing the implementation plan. We're seeing NIST put out guidance. We're seeing SF invest in organizations. So I think we're going to start to see a lot of content towards the end of this year being published to help organizations get on the right track or to get to optimize what they're doing today.
That is fantastic. We will have your link to your LinkedIn so that people can stay up to date and stay informed on all of your guidance and insight right there in the show notes. And we thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. It was
so
a pleasure.
much.
Thank you.
See you guys. Well, that wraps this up. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our episode. The next one is coming right up. We appreciate you making this an award-winning podcast and downloading on Apple and Spotify and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is Cybercrime Junkies, and we thank you for watching.